Yes. Hi, Michael.
Hello. Good morning.
Well, it's morning in California where you are, at Santa Barbara.
Oh,
In Kansas City, it's afternoon.
oh,
Al-
that's right.
Almost time for my nap, in fact. Well, Michael, welcome to my YouTube channel, the YouTube channel of Downey, author. Welcome to a conversation with Michael Downey about your play, The War Shirt. Aside from being my genius brother, you're a playwright, director, producer, retired drama professor, and currently movement therapist. Also, previously a professional dancer. Thank you for letting me interview you. Kind of used to being on the other end of this, where you're giving me wonderful feedback on my writing. So it's fun to be on the other side of this, interviewing my brother about our childhood, which the play, among other things, is a demonstration that siblings live together in completely different families. So thank you for letting me interview you, Michael. The play, The War Shirt, recounts your difficult relationship with dad, your coming of age as a gay man, and your reconciliation with dad on his deathbed. The title character, the war shirt, is a ceremonial garment handmade for dad by Dakota Sioux historian and artisan Faith Badbear. When dad died, well, before he died, he passed the shirt on to you. So when dad died, you inherited the war shirt and everything it symbolizes. Now, to give us an idea, to let us see how dramatic this shirt is and why it plays such a big role in this story. I know you've got it there with you, so why don't you hold it up so that and show the colors and the beadwork and Dad, of course, was a writer and author in Santa Barbara, California, and then as part of his journey, he was attracted to the state of Montana and did a writer's workshop there. And while he was there, felt a calling to get a war shirt made for himself. Back it up from the camera just a little bit, Michael, so we can see. So, what's hanging on the back of it besides fringe?
This is horsehair. Uh, horsehair. Part of the tradition of the shirt, the war shirt, is that um, Native people admired specific properties that animals had. And so sometimes they represented those animals on their shirts with the hope that they would inherit those same abilities.
Back
So
it up, Michael, back it up from the camera, like right up against your, yeah. So we can see, yeah, that's beautiful. God, the colors. So, what is the symbolism of what property of the horse?
well, I don't know specifically, but Native people certainly prized horses. They revolutionized the way they lived. They provided speed and agility. They were very strong, so they could be put to work. So they had that combination of strength and speed, which probably um, was very desirable for a
Here,
warrior.
hold it still, Michael. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Now turn it around so I can see the front of it. God, that is so beautiful. I've seen it other times, but the color is just showing up so startlingly. crystal clear and dramatic. The turquoise on the, is it deerskin?
Uh, I don't know if it's deer or elk.
Oh,
Now, the beadwork is very interesting because Faith, who made the shirt, asked Dad for images from his dreams. And Dad told her that horses and grandmothers were predominant in his dreams. And so some of those symbols are uh, in the shirt. So I don't know what the symbol for the horses are, but there are, let me move this closer. There are, let me see here. Oh gosh, I can find it. There are these two little red,
yes.
show up very well, but they're sitting grandmothers.
Oh,
So there's psychological and spiritual power in the shirt as well.
wow. Is that a cross? Do I see a cross?
Uh, I showed this to a gentleman who is very knowledgeable about the Crow and Sioux cultures, and he's thought it might be the symbol of a dragonfly.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, that is so beautiful. Thank you for taking such beautiful care of it for all these years. Um, I know there are other parts of the there's an entire a drum and a feather fan and leggings and moccasins that go with this. And they're beautiful. I want to talk about the play now.
Yes, certainly.
God, but that's gonna help put things into perspective when the shirt comes up in the play.
Yes.
So in the play, there are three scenes that stand out to me as really pivotal, dramatic turns in your relationship with Dad. And I'll point them out as we go along. But first, God, Michael, congratulations on this huge accomplishment in your life and your career to do this show, to write it, to to be the only actor in it, aside from some voice work by others, and promoting it. I know that Rod Latham directed you, but all the work you did, and congratulations. It was and so well received by everyone who's seen it. I will put a link to the video of the play in the comments that will appear, comment section appears below this video. I know you'd been thinking about this story for a long, long time. What happened the day before you sat down to write it? What moved you from wanting to write this story to opening a document on your computer?
That's a fascinating question. I'm not sure I can pinpoint a specific time. It was more like a continual evolution. Um, Immediately after Dad passed away and I got the shirt, I realized I had inherited something very special. Not just the shirt, but those final interactions with Dad. It was closure that not a lot of people have with their parents when they're facing their final moments. So I realized that I needed to share that experience, and I pondered about the best way to share that. And so being trained and active in the theater, I suppose it was just natural that I would choose a play as my vehicle. So I didn't know exactly how to go about writing a play. So I began to talk about my experience. I began to just kind of voice the best way I could what had happened to me and how important I thought that was. And so I think one of the turning points was I knew a man in town, Michael Katz, who's a well-known storyteller. And so Michael and I weren't really friends. We knew each other. We traveled in similar circles. But I contacted Michael and I said, I have this story I'm trying to write, and it's a play. And could I just come and talk to you about my concept? So we met at a restaurant and I shared what I was working on, and he just fell in love with the idea. And he gave me lots and lots of suggestions about how to proceed, none of which I followed through on.
But
But he left town and then came back a couple of years later, and I ran into him again. And he said, "Well, hey, what about that play you're working on?" And I said, "Well, I haven't really done that much." And he said, "Well, how about if I serve as a witness to what you're doing? You write something, you bring it over to my place, you read it, and I'll give you feedback." And that was the support that I really needed.
yeah,
That was the catalyst that
yeah.
really.
I know what you mean. There's to be heard. It kind of keeps you going. To it gets you over the hump. What I'm hearing is it got you over the hump of I really ought to well, here's someone who wants to hear it. That's so great. That's really great. That's very helpful to as a writer. The idea that having an external informal audience in that very first fragile moment of committing to paper is really important. Um, the first the first scene that struck me as very illustrative of your childhood and what that felt like was towards the beginning. You're talking about you were in grade school. There was a bully across the street, and this kid had been bullying you. When dad found out that you were afraid to fight the bully, you were outside, and dad attacked you and shook you and threw you down on the ground and raged at you, yelling, "If you don't fight the bully, you're going to have to fight me." How old were you?
Maybe 8 years old.
That's what I was thinking, 8 or 10 years old. Um, that was really hard for to watch because you reenacted your part, your childhood part of being in that awfulness with dad and being attacked by dad like that. And it was just very painful to watch it. I needed to know, were you all right afterwards? What happened the next day to between you and his name, James Jr.? Did you have an interaction with James Jr. after that?
Oh, I'm sure I did. Interestingly, I don't recall what those were.
Mhm. Well, in the face of the interaction with dad, that would be really minor. So, and when you went in the house after dad did this to you, after he attacked you, what were you hurt? Did you have serious injuries?
Well, the impact of hitting the sidewalk.
It was a sidewalk, not just the ground. It was,
Right, right. So the concrete split my pants at the knee, and my knee was bleeding. And so um, I found my way back home,
oh,
and
I'm sorry, you weren't home?
Oh, well, Dad raged at me and because I ran into the house crying when James had beat me up. And so Dad looked at me and he raged and said, "Well, you're going to fight James Jr., you're going to fight me." And he just dragged me out of the house and dragged me, past our front fence, and there's a sidewalk there. And he shook me just so hard and then just threw me down on the ground when I wouldn't fight. And then he turned around and walked away in disgust,
Mm.
just left me there.
And was, this was an illustration of what your childhood was like. And there were four of us at the time. You were the oldest, twin sister Michelle, then me, 4 years younger, and Bill Jr., about a year and a half younger than me. So this to me was, oh, this is how Michael grew up. So there's this helpless child victim of this huge man. I mean, even if he wasn't 6 feet and muscular, he'd be a huge man if you're only an 8-year-old kid. So for me, this was pivotal because it is the setting of the stage of what this relationship was through your childhood. And then when you were in high school, we have to get out of this painful childhood for a while. But let me go back for just a minute. So you were bleeding, and when you went in the house, did Mama fix you up?
I don't have any recollection of what
Okay.
she did.
Okay. These details are really interesting to me because I have very little recollection. And so you've been generous enough to share your memories with me to help me understand my own childhood. So let's skip to high school.
Ah,
When you were in high school, we're in Des Moines, you were at East High School in Des Moines, you discovered theater and fell in love with theater. Well, at the same time, Dad, who owned his own um, body shop, car repair shop, Bill's Body Shop in Des Moines, Dad discovered theater also at the same time. And he joined the Des Moines Community Playhouse. And he had a small role in one play and then quit to do other things. You, on the other hand, became skilled and talented and expertise in all aspects of theater, acting, directing, writing, teaching. You became a scholar of the theater. Uh, How was your interest and commitment to theater shaped by that brief time that by seeing Dad on stage at the Playhouse?
oh, it was wonderfully inspiring. In fact, that was one of the ironies of my relationship with Dad. He could be abusive, he could be cruel, he could be emotionally remote and unavailable, and then he could be thoroughly captivating and inspiring. So when I saw him in that play, it's like he just radiated this charm and confidence. And it was just an energy that totally enveloped me, and I was so proud of him. And I think in some way, what he was doing was validating my own interest in the theater.
Oh, yes, without having to have a conversation.
Exactly.
So up until this point, um, well, I was speculating and I don't want to do that. That's really neat that you get that validation not through conversation, but through his actions. And he, I imagine, didn't even know you were interested in theater at that point.
Well, if he did, he didn't really acknowledge it very
Right,
much.
right, right, right. Dad divorced Mama and remarried Kim Carroll, whom he met through the Playhouse. And after a few years, he took the three of us younger kids and moved us out to California with him and his new wife, whom I call Mother. I will say Mother. And uh, when you say Kim, that is
Same person.
same person. Thank you. um, you were in Des Moines living with Mama for a couple of years, going to City College, right? Junior college?
Yeah, Grandview College.
Grandview Community College in Des Moines. And when
Yes.
you finished Grandview, so you must have been about 18 or so, I imagine.
Yes.
Um, Mother, we figured out Mother did this, not Dad, sent you a train ticket to California so that you could enroll in college in California, resident tuition, and avoid the Vietnam draft.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So you get off the train in California and you're 18 or so, grown man. Um, while you lived in, I guess we were in Altadena.
Yes.
Okay, so while you lived in, so while we lived in Altadena, I was in high school, you were at you
Well,
were
I enrolled at California State
Cal
College.
State. Yes, you transferred to 4-year Cal State LA. Uh,
Yes.
while during those couple of years that we were all living together in Altadena, how did you and he approach or avoid the issue of your sexuality, which I would imagine at age 18, I mean, he already was disapproving of your personality, criticizing it as your interests as too feminine, even as a child. So when you get to California as 18, and there's these 2 years when you're living under the same roof, how did you and he approach or avoid the issue of your sexuality?
Well, actually, it didn't come up because I didn't live with him for 2 years. I was extremely angry, and I blamed Kim for my parents' divorce. And so I did everything I could to make life miserable for her. So she came up to me one day and said, you're too old to live at home. So your father and I have decided you need to find your own place. So I did.
Essentially, they set you free.
Yes, yes, yes.
Congratulations.
So I didn't really have that much interaction with dad. But on the other hand, I sensed that it was a tremendously tumultuous time for him. Huge transitions were taking place. He was in a new state with a new wife. It was an interracial marriage. He was really redefining his sense of who he was.
Mhm,
So there, of course, at that time, I had no idea what all those things were,
mhm, mhm,
but he was just a very turbulent personality.
mhm,
So I just kind of got the vibe, but there wasn't really that much opportunity for dialogue.
mhm,
Now, in terms of the sexuality part, it's very interesting. That shortly after that time, Dad and the family moved to Santa Barbara, and I was in LA to finish up my undergraduate degree. So during that time in LA, I met a man who was a theater director, and had an acting group, which I joined. And so this man was gay and lived in a gorgeous house in Glendale, which is, I think, a little north
Yeah.
of the LA area, with three other gay men. So they just kind of took me in and um, adopted me. And so when I graduated, dad and the family came to the graduation. My mother came from Iowa to the graduation, and my gay friends came to the graduation. And there was this moment when everybody was in this reception area, kind of sensing one another, and it was very weird, very strange.
Oh God, I bet it was. Oh my gosh. I remember going to your graduation, but that's all I remember. Um, oh, that's just fascinating. This clash of cultures. Dad, because he knows you're gay. He's not stupid. Um, but doesn't want to acknowledge. And to have this clash of not only just the different personalities and different attitudes, but here is on the one hand is this safe space that has found you. These men have found you and adopted you and mentored you and made you safe. And then over here, you've got this family that is like, we're always fighting or sullen. Supportive is not a word that is not part of our vocabulary. Whoa. That's I remember just always being tense in our family. I can see part of it, the reason why now. Well, you talk in the play, you get to a point where you actually join, um, you are hired into a dance company, a professional dance company, the Arwanda Lewis Dance Company. Now, I remember my brother's in a dance company. I had no idea what that meant in terms of what your life looked like. I remember you um, touring. Remember, you would go places to perform, and that just seemed very exotic. I remember you talking about learning American Sign Language as part of that somehow. Do you remember that? Just,
Oh, well, part of our work was working with a school for deaf and hearing impaired children. And so we got a grant to do that work. And so Arwanda Lewis, the director, was already taking classes in sign language. So she was really interested in that. And so we were learning, rudiments of that whole communication system.
yes, yes. I was wondering, and I suspect the answer to this now. Um, when you joined Arwanda Lewis, and that must have been, God, that would have been such a proud moment. You were hired by a professional dance company. I'm sure you had to audition, right?
I did.
God, that is another huge accomplishment. I'm sure you must have phoned home to tell us all about it. What was the response to this momentous news?
Well, I'm sure that I called the family. In fact, one time we played at UC Santa Barbara, and Dad came, and I think he even wrote a review of the play, of the performance. So yeah, they knew. I don't remember specifically calling and telling them, but they knew. So obviously there was that communication.
I know that Mother liked to give parties, and it occurs to me that this would have been just the perfect occasion for one of her parties. And it sounds like there really wasn't any congratulations, Michael, no card, no, hey, good job. We're proud of you. None of that. So I'm sorry about that, Michael. That was just an amazing, wonderful thing to be uh, part of a professional dance company. So
Well, they enjoyed the performance. Dad
Yeah.
wrote a good review. I wish I had a copy of that.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Awesome there.
It's so funny. He wrote a review of your dance company's performance, and I think one of the first things I wrote as a writer was for the news press reviews of dance company performances.
I was going to say you did. In fact, I remember coming across a review that you wrote of Aman, which was a folk dance ensemble in Los Angeles. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the sub stories, subplots of the Arwanda Lewis years is that you began a relationship with another one of the dancers, whose name is Darnell, who turned out to be violent and abusive. You describe a moment of absolute clarity about your relationship with Darnell, which I took to mean that you, in this moment of clarity, understood that this relationship was abusive. You needed to get out of it right now to save your life.
yes, yes.
Talk about a moment of clarity about your relationship with dad.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a phenomenal question. Well, first of all, I would say that there were moments when I perceived real contradictions of
Mhm.
dad, when my concept of who I thought he was didn't match with what I was experiencing. And I think that dissonance may have opened my mind to being receptive to other realities here. Um, I remember being with him once. He made me go hunting, and we were hunting raccoons. You know, it was a real manly thing to do there.
So
So,
this would have been when we lived in Des Moines.
I think so. Yes, yes. So, so anyway, there was this moment when we took a break. It was in the dead of night, but a very clear night with all of these stars. The constellations were so vivid. And Dad looked at the sky in this completely reverent way. And he told me how ancient sailors had relied on the stars to navigate their voyages. And he talked about nature as a coherent system. And he was so articulate and reverent. And it was a state of mind, a state of life that I had never experienced with him before. The sensitivity with which he spoke just dazzled me.
Mhm.
Where did he learn that? Who is he?
Who is he?
Who is he? Yes. That
Mhm.
question just tormented me for so many years.
Mhm.
I think the experience of him at the Playhouse was another moment. You know, this incredible, tuned in person, so joyful at being who he was, sharing that joy with the audience. That was another moment. Because I often thought, well, he's a body and fender guy. You know, what's he doing in the theater?
Exactly.
So I think periodically there were these moments, and eventually I was able to connect the dots. And actually, the final clarity came at the point of death when he invited me to spend the night with him.
Mhm.
You know, he
Oh, we're
was,
coming to that.
oh, okay. So should I leave that
No,
or?
no spoiler alerts, Michael.
All right. Okay. All right.
So instead of moments of clarity, you actually had moments of confusion, very clear, distinct confusion about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, and that just came through in another scene that I'm going to point out. Um, but I want to go back to you and Darnell for a second.
Sure.
After you ended the relationship with Darnell, you left the company, the dance company, and moved back home. Dad came and got you. He was driving from Santa Barbara, probably at that point, the 2 hours to LA where you live, to come and get you and move you back home, so that you could refocus your life.
I think it's significant to add that I came home because Dad called me and invited me.
Oh,
That
okay.
he said he and Kim had talked it over and decided I could come back to Santa Barbara. He said there was dance studios where I could teach. He said you could live at the house till you get yourself together. And
Yeah.
that act of reaching out was another instance of where my perception of who I thought my father was.
Right, right. Oh my God, I'm just feeling these personal things come up. Like, don't say what you really think here, Dawn. But I wonder, as you're describing this, what he said to you, are you, it sounds like mother said those things, and then he said them to you.
Oh,
You even pointed that out
oh,
when you got the train ticket, you came to understand, oh, wait a minute. Dad didn't do this. This was Kim who saved me.
oh, you are so right, Dawn. There was another moment. It was in Des Moines. I think I had started Grandview College, and I was working for Dad one summer, and he tried to talk to me about my sexuality.
Oh, yes.
And he said, well, sometimes young men are confused about their sexuality. And the language he used just didn't fit. It wasn't Dad. And I knew that Kim had kind of orchestrated that conversation.
Michael, one of us is going to have to write the play about Mother, because she is every bit as divisive and inspirational and intriguing and confounding as Dad, except she didn't hit us.
Well, the thing is, as I was writing the play, Kim became a more prominent character in my
Yeah, yeah,
story.
yeah, 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 yeah. And there's something about writing that you or you, not on purpose, touch on some truths that were in there that you didn't know were in there.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. So I'm thinking about this drive home, you and Dad and your stuff, 2 hours in the car, alone together. Envisioning awkward silences, and then because this is the epitome of who Dad does not think a man is. I mean, you've been victimized by this young man. He was younger than you, and you've got the bruises to show it, the black eyes and the bruises to show it. Um, and I might, if I were to get into Dad's head a little bit, I might think, hmm, is he seeing himself here and as possibly the Darnell in your life? I don't know. But
Ooh, that's provocative.
did he have a moment? Was that part of his if there were awkward silences, was that part of his awkward silence? Mm. So at any rate, during this drive home in the play, you say that Dad called your relationship with Darnell obscene,
Yes,
and he did not clarify that, and you didn't ask him to clarify it.
I was afraid to.
Right, right. Looking back now, um, what aspect of the relationship do you believe he was referring to?
Ooh, that's the big question. Um, it could have been, I don't know. That's
Okay.
a real honest answer. Could have been the fact that it was so violent. Maybe that was the obscenity. Maybe it's the fact that two men were having sex. I don't know.
Mhm.
And by the way, we were not alone when we drove home because
Oh.
Dad brought Wayne, our youngest brother, and
Mm.
our cousin Alan. And so
Alan was there.
he was visiting at that time. So they had
Oh
to
my
pack
gosh.
up my stuff and
Oh my gosh. You couldn't really talk about it. Okay, so you're 20 something, right?
right. Well,
20.
no, I was early 30s.
Okay, so you're early 30s. That would have put me at about 26. That would have put Wayne at 15 years younger than me, 25.
I think Wayne was about 16 years old
Thank
then.
you. I could not do the math. So you got these two teenage boys, you and dad. Oh God.
So the conversation you're referring to about Dad calling the relationship obscene actually took place in Dad's living room, and Kim was there
Oh.
too. And they were asking details about what had happened. And I think I started off by telling them that I was bisexual because I thought that was safer than to say I'm gay. And then Dad said, "Well, we knew it." And then I can't remember exactly what happened next, but we were talking about that relationship. And that's when Dad said, "Your relationship was obscene." And he just said it straight on.
And didn't say anything else. I can see the silent stare.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh my God. And he's sitting there with his, like he's a cliff, a mountain, just sitting
yes,
there with all of this compressed power,
yeah.
not saying anything, and he's just looming in the silence. He's not looking at you. I have been in this position with dad, and he's not looking at you, but the threat. Did you feel a threat?
Not a threat, but
Okay.
intense judgment.
Intense judgment.
You
Wow.
haven't measured up. You failed. Those are the messages.
And he didn't have to say it.
No, no.
Man. Yeah.
Are you okay?
Yes, yes. Just trying to make these transitions because I remember these meetings in our living room, and in my memory, it would be somebody's turn. Somebody was called on the carpet where the rest of us would say what was wrong with you psychologically, emotionally, and we would just steer you in the right path. This is what you need to do. And everybody had a turn at this. And I remember several turns, and this was your turn. So I've totally sympathize with you being part of this conversation because this was a regular part of life in the Downey household, which this will be part of our mother Kim mother play because that was her doing.
It
Um,
was. It was.
yeah, she initiated these. I know how to help people psychologically. Whew. All right. So here's the transition. This, in light of this conversation, is stunning to me because the next few years in the play, you describe a period of time where you and dad are both flourishing in your creativity and you have conversations about writing and you're just really connecting in this creative equals place for it sounds like at least a couple of years. And it just sounds so beautiful. And I know these conversations because I've had them with people other than dad, where you just are connecting around creativity and writing and how it's unconscious and connected to spirit and it's uplifting and beautiful, and you just float after that. And you,
Well,
yes.
yes, it's interesting you would say that because when I was still living in LA, I started writing for an arts magazine called New World, and I would send copies home to Dad, and he just
Oh,
fell in love with what I was doing.
okay.
So
That's,
it's like this opening that connected us.
yes.
And so I remember one time I was visiting Santa Barbara, and he gave me a draft of his novel, Black Viking. It was before it was published, and he gave it to me to read. And it was like he just given his heart to me, and
Yeah.
I treasured that. I treasured that. I guarded that manuscript with my life, and I felt so honored that he would
Right.
do. So when I did move back to Santa Barbara, he gave me a typewriter that had belonged to his Dick Smith, who'd been a naturalist and one of Dad's colleagues at the newspaper.
Oh,
So that was another symbol of how much he valued what I was doing. And so I also had the opportunity to take his writing classes. And
and
so
of
that,
all the things I'm jealous of about you, it is that you got to take his writing class and you got closure. Those are
yes.
actually two things. You got to take his writing class. Oh, so go ahead.
Well, so in those 2 years that you mentioned, there were things reinforcing that opening between us. It was an opening of our art, an opening of our relationship. And so it really was wonderful. I remember having just gorgeous talks with Dad about writing. And I remember one time he said, it's expensive to write. He said, you really sacrifice a lot. And he said, success is expensive. And he said, young writers, they're all captivated by the promise of fame and recognition, but they don't realize what it costs you to do that. And he just, because he was this man, he'd go into his room and be there for hours. And Kim told me once that she hated those periods because he was just so unavailable then. And then another time he talked to me about how writing takes its own voice. And he said, you write, you have to write with a sense of trust. You write when you don't know why you're writing what you're writing, but it just has to come out the way it comes out. And that when you're done with it, you can look back on it and say, ah, that's what it meant. But
Oh man.
own insights he had.
Oh, the insights. And thank you for telling me because you're like a channel for me. These are things that I have learned as a writer. To hear you speaking Dad's words that I never got to hear, I can't even describe what that feels like.
Yeah.
Because of course he was a phenomenal teacher and mentor to other writers, three generations of writers in Santa Barbara and thereabouts. Um, Let me just pull myself together because I was intending to be this objective journalist here, but
You're in a tough spot. A very tough spot. You're the objective journalist, and yet you are a participant in my own journey.
yes, yes, this is just, I could not have imagined I was going to get this gift from you. So this is going to lead to other conversations. Um, at the same time, you're having these conversations with Dad and you're connecting around your creativity. Um, you're teaching dance and theater. Dad is writing, teaching creative writing. And in the play, you talk about Dad creating a children's workshop around creativity. Are you with me?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And in the play, you tell us that he offers you a spot to co-teach this workshop with him, which, whoa, what a gift. What an honor. What a validation. But there's a condition. So
Yeah.
during this time, you found this safe place as a gay man with these four men in Los Angeles. And in that healthier state, you move to Santa Barbara and you become involved. You join a gay men's support group. The stipulation for you code teaching this children's workshop with dad is that he wants you to quit the gay men's support group. A couple of questions. One, damn, you finally get validation on levels that are really profoundly important to you: your creativity, your process, your dance, your theater. And then he snatches it away from you. He slams the door on you again. I, how did, how did you, oh, and before I try to get this question out, I was so proud of you in the play when you said, I refuse to quit the support group. This was for me. I was so proud of you. Go, Michael. Yes. And this is the second place in, this is the second scene when you're describing your feelings around refusing to quit the group. This is the second scene that for me is a huge, pivotal, dramatic turn in your relationship with dad, because this is the point where your power is equal. He is trying to be this bully, and it doesn't work because you are now Michael, and you take the route of standing up for your true self against dad's wishes. And you know at this point what it feels like to be on the receiving end of his anger and his judgment. So, yay, Michael. Oh my God. What did he say to you when you quit, when you refused to quit that group?
Well, let me think. What did he say? The word deflated comes to my head. That he was perhaps a little bit deflated. Um, and he decided he'd hire somebody else, which, I assume he did. I don't remember exactly what he said,
Mhm.
but you're right. When you describe the significance of that moment, that choice I made, it was a turn in my relationship with myself.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So I don't remember specifically what he said. He just kind of mumbled something and hired somebody else, but it's like the steam had been taken out of his sails.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Did he try to reassert himself as the domineering father in your life after that?
Um, Well, there was a blow up that we had over how he and Uncle Al were handling our grandmother's finances.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Um, So, but we got through that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, let me just let's linger in this success for a minute.
sure. Okay, yes.
To take me through how that felt for you to stand up for yourself and the realization that that's what you had done.
Well, for me, it was a matter of survival, emotional, psychological survival. I had to do that. It was just, it was really akin to that moment when I stood up to Darnell and got out of that relationship. Said, Michael, if you don't get out of this, you're going to die. So, same thing with dad. Michael, if you don't refuse dad's request, you're going to die. And
Yeah.
to live, life is the most important thing. Self affirmation was the most important thing.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So, I'm not sure if I'm answering your.
Yes. No, you're answering beautifully.
Okay.
Thank you. And it jumps me ahead a little bit to your description of the first time you saw dad in the war shirt, but you said that you felt like you were witnessing dad creating his life, creating the role that he wanted to play in his life. And really, this standing up for yourself, it just seems like that's what you were doing at that moment.
Yeah. Wow. You are so insightful. Oh my gosh. I love receiving my play through your lens. It's just,
Isn't it fun?
yes, wonderful.
Oh, you put some things in there. You were just genius and you knew know it. Yeah. Yeah, that was cool. Which takes us to the point in the play. So that was the number two scene where you go, oh man, things just changed and they're never going back. Um, so now we're all still in Santa Barbara. And this is towards the end of the play, we're introduced to the actual war shirt, um, which dad had put on because the spiritual group that he and mother were involved in was doing a naming ceremony for dad's great grandson, Anthony, who was about 4 or 5 at the time.
I didn't put that detail in the play, but yes, you're right.
Okay. And they were guardians, maybe
Yes.
not at that point, but anyway, the shirt was symbolizing his role as guardian, head of the family, spiritual warrior, ceremony, because they're doing this ceremony for Anthony. And so he puts on his ceremonial shirt, and you have never seen the shirt, and you're totally shocked to see this beautiful garment. And you talk about
Yes. Yes.
uh,
Yes.
the conversation that you had questioning dad about where'd you get this shirt? What are you doing with it? You're not Indian, basically.
Yes.
And dad tells you that it leads to a conversation about his indigenous heritage and how he's been unable to express his indigenous heritage to claim his indigenous ancestors because the world from the very beginning has treated him as a black man, and so he hasn't been able to, and he really um relates is not resonates with his native ancestors. And at this point, I'll say that Papa Johnson, his great grandfather, was Blackfoot, which is a nation in Montana and Canada. And dad went to Montana to teach. And while he was in Montana, I'm kind of assuming he got in touch with this aspect. He was able to more openly explore this aspect. But when you had this conversation with Dad just before the ceremony with Anthony, how did that war shirt affect your view of Dad at that point? It must have been one of those moments of clear confusion.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Well, there were so many things happening on so many levels when he revealed that shirt. Um, but from time to time when we were growing up, he would mention that we had Native heritage, but he never went into detail, and I never thought that much about it until later when I started writing and I recalled those references. So when he pulled the shirt out, you're asking how I responded or what it meant to me or what?
Yes, did it affect your view of Dad? I mean, you grew up with this man, and over the course of years and decades, your opinions and your relationship with him changes, morphs. How did this?
What was another moment when he pulled the rug out from under my feet? Um, it's similar to a time when I was in maybe fourth grade, and I'd been kind of, let's see, what happened? Oh, Dad went to one of my open houses. And so I was working for him in the summers at the body shop, and he would be in these dirty coveralls, just grimy from the work that he did, talking with the guys, lots of profanity. And then he came to this workshop or the open house, and he had on a nice sports jacket, cologne. He's extremely articulate. He was talking about the literary contributions of William Thackeray, one of the early American writers. And the next day, my teacher was just ecstatic. She said, "Oh, your father is so urbane." And so, listen, there I am having to reconcile these two completely different experiences of Dad. So this moment when he pulled out the shirt was another one of those moments. I didn't know he had a war shirt. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know he was involved in this. So who in
Mhm,
the heck are you?
mhm,
What does this shirt mean?
mhm,
Why would these folks make this shirt for you if it's as
mhm,
special as you say it is,
mhm,
since you're not an Indian?
mhm, mhm.
So I was totally fascinated. And I think at the root of it, Dawn, I was having this very visceral experience of the shirt when it was just speaking to me on the subliminal level. And Dad said, even before he pulled the shirt out, he said, "Well, these folks are here. We're having this ceremony. I think I'm going to wear my war shirt." And as soon as he said he said medicine shirt. And as
Man,
soon as he said that word medicine shirt, I felt this sensation going down my spine. And then he pulled out this garment. It was so alive. It just virtually jumped off the clothes hanger. And so I was having this gut experience with the shirt. I was having this intellectual moment of confusion with Dad because I didn't know anything about the shirt and its traditions and Dad's involvement in it. So I was just all over the place. At the same time, I was fascinated. Fascinated. It's like opening a door to another world.
mhm,
And he
mhm,
was sharing that with me.
mhm,
So it was just an
mhm,
incredible experience.
mhm.
And the shirt is alive, it still lives. Uh,
Yes, I know what you mean when you held it up. Um, it just the first thing that got me was how vivid the color were, but you're right, it's alive. And even I've seen it in person, but for some reason, seeing it today across the internet, it was alive in a way that I hadn't experienced before at all.
Interesting. Because, when I pulled it out of the cedar chest and unwrapped it, it kind of struck me the same way. Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, that is fascinating.
Well, we're getting into metaphysical territory here.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Oh, your father is such a paradox. All right, so the years following the reveal of the war shirt, Dad is already pretty old, and he's contracted pulmonary fibrosis, a terminal lung disease, which we all believe he contracted from all the years in the body shop, inhaling paint fumes and chemical fumes. Um, for the last few weeks of his life, Mother has died of cancer. And so for the last few weeks of his life, he lives in a retirement home, in a little apartment in a very nice retirement home. His body goes into a crisis for lack of oxygen because he's made a mistake in um, running an errand and grabbing the wrong oxygen tank. And he grabbed one that didn't have any oxygen in it.
Yep.
And so his body goes into a crisis and he barely can crawl from the parking lot back to his apartment. And um, he's dying. And a day or so before he dies, he calls you to come and sit with him. And in the course of that visit, the two of you talk. And as you say, and in the play, you describe this closure, this incredible closure that you have with Dad on his deathbed. And he validates you as a gay man and as his personal moral compass. And this is the third scene, because in this scene, we have a complete reversal of roles. In the first scene, with you as a child, a victim of his abuse, you're a victim, helpless. Um, and he is, I can't even describe it because I've lost, I've lost my objectivity. And so in this scene, the power is with you. The power is with you. And I don't mean that in a forceful power. I mean, the power of the moment, the power of the relationship is with you. He is now completely helpless. Physically, he's skinny. He's swallowed up in this tiny, the bed's already tiny and he's swallowed up in it. He's just a skeleton and he is completely helpless and on his way out. You are not in your prime because that's yet to come, but you are in this moment of you're the executor of his will. You have been named the person in charge in the family. And so you get this validation from him. What was I know this was closure for you and validation, but what was the most important thing he said to you in that conversation that affected the way you saw yourself in that moment and the way you saw your future? What was the most important thing he said to you then?
Oh, that's hard to answer, Dawn. It was the cumulative impact of the specific things he said, the specific ways in which he validated me. He said he had great respect for my principles, which was huge.
Gosh.
Said he had learned so much from me, which was huge. He said that he realized that my gentleness was a form of strength. The big clincher, he said, when I'm around you, I realize you've shown me another way to be close to God. So those were huge uh, validations that he gave me. And then, Dawn, underneath all that, there was this spirit, this energetic something or other that was going on just for moments. But I just felt that what he was saying was coming from this deep, eternal place. That there was an influence that kind of went beyond his own life, that he had awarenesses that went to the eternal past. So there was something eternal in what he was telling me. And I think that is essentially what stirred me up.
Mm-hmm.
Spiritually, there was something that he was transmitting to me
Mm-hmm.
beyond the words he was saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, oh,
Well, like you said, very few of us get to have um, closure. I There was something that you said that he said in that conversation that you told us. One of the things he said was that um, you listened, and that was had to do with your namesake, that you took after your namesake, the
yeah, that's right.
Archangel Michael.
I have to go back and read my script.
Yes, you had to go back and read it because that caught
He
me.
did say that, yes.
That caught me, Michael, because my understanding of the Archangel Michael is not about his ability to listen. And so I looked it up.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
You've done some preparation for this.
Yeah, this is so, I love this. So in the Catholic teachings, which of course is the first Christian religion, Catholicism, Saint Michael has several roles. His first role is the leader of the army of God. He's not a saint because he listens, he's a saint because he's a warrior.
Oh,
He is the leader of heaven's army, heaven's forces in their triumph over the powers of hell, because there's, of course, this big battle between heaven and hell. Michael is viewed as the angelic model for the virtues of the spiritual warrior. And spiritual warrior is something you reported having resistance to when I think someone connected with making the shirt told you it was a war shirt, and you said, I got nothing to do with war. Well, this is your name. uh, then the other roles for Michael in Catholic teachings, Michael is the angel of death. In this role, he carries the souls of Christians to heaven. But listen to this. Michael descends at the hour of death and gives each soul the chance to redeem itself before passing. That's your namesake.
oh my gosh. Oh, oh. That's what happened, wasn't it? Oh, holy smokes. Oh, oh, Dawn. Oh my gosh. This is profound.
He named you Michael.
Yeah, he did. Was he aware of what he was doing when he named me that?
In this way, he was, the transmission, I'm sure, not consciously.
Wow,
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
to say the least.
Yeah, I like that.
And then Jean Eater, whom Dad met when he was teaching in Montana, had her own insights on me as a warrior.
Hmm.
Um, when it was Georgia Badbear, the mother of the woman Faith, who made the shirt, and it was her observation that the shirt was a war shirt of some kind.
Oh,
And I inwardly freaked out and remained calm on the outside.
right.
Took the shirt back to my hotel, and then I called Jeannie, whom I'd been wanting to meet. And I said to her over the phone, I said, well, what am I supposed to do with this shirt? I'm not a warrior.
Hmm.
And then
Hmm.
she calmly proceeded to tell me that um, in her culture, gay men are viewed as sacred, that they have a special relationship with the creator. They have a vision of life that's not exclusively male or female. She said, you are what I would call a contrary warrior because you have the ability to show others another view of life.
Hmm.
So I suppose that's compatible with what you said about the Archangel Michael.
Absolutely. And what Dad said about you showing him a different way of love.
Yeah.
The story is just, it's a great story, Michael. It's a great story.
Well, I think I'm discovering how powerful it is. I was obsessed with writing it.
Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens. That's what happens. Well, I'm going to ask you one final question. A lot of the focus, well, some of the focus that starts out, your opening scene is about being connected to ancestors through our grandmother Mun and her storytelling.
Yes.
So I'll leave you with you're on a journey by your own statements. You're on a journey with your ancestors, to your ancestors. So, what is the next step on your journey with one, your African and Black ancestors, and two, your journey with your Blackfoot ancestors? Next step on the journey.
Well, I don't know what it means, but I have two photographs. In fact, when we finish our visit today, I'm going to get these framed. These are two photographs of my Black ancestors. So they just need to be a presence in my living space. So this first one is the woman in the center is our great grandmother, Fanny Bell Brown, known as Mama Fanny. And she's standing with her parents, Daniel Abernathy Brown on one side and Ellen Evans Brown on the other side. And the Browns were born in slavery. And so it just, on one level, kind of reminds me of that experience of slavery, that it's not, it still has an impact,
It's
and
not.
we're not done with it. And so I think this is a visual reminder of what I've come from and how the successes I enjoy are so connected to the courageous efforts of these ancestors. Daniel ran away at about age 15 from his owner and crossed the state line from Missouri into Iowa, and then ultimately became a minister. But what if he had never mustered the courage to run away? How would that have impacted our lives? Maybe we wouldn't even be here. And so then this next photograph, which became the logo for our poster logo, this girl on the far end is our grandmother, Beulah Downey. And she was the channel because she was close to the Browns. She would spend
Oh.
part of her time as a girl in Missouri with them and then went to boarding school in Ottumwa, Iowa. So she carried the stories and her knowledge of the family and passed that on to me. So it's like a living lineage that is passed down from one generation to the other.
Mhm.
Now, the danger, one of the great dangers of abuse is that it cuts off the transmission of that knowledge and experience. And
Mhm.
so I could say more about that. But so anyway, this boy is my grandmother's brother, our Uncle Cornette, who worked as a miner in
Mhm.
coal mines in Iowa. And then Ellen Brown reportedly was whipped by her owner. And so her husband had taught himself to read and write and tried to teach her literacy by reading from Harriet Beecher Stowe's novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. So the references to slavery in that book apparently upset her to the point where our great great grandfather would have to stop reading. But anyway, marvelous stories in and of themselves, that we are continuing those
Yes.
stories
Yes.
and
Yes. Yes.
expanding with our own
Yes.
activities and
Yes.
accomplishments.
Yes. Yes. That is beautiful. That's, oh, thank you for being the keeper of the stories. And you inspire me to write them down, to
Yes, we must write them down.
write them down. Thank you.
Otherwise, the generations following us will have no idea who they are or
Where they came from,
where they came
but
from,
why they are.
why they are. Yes, yes, thank you.
Yeah, this has been the big mystery of my adulthood. Why I am. What is this? Why are all these, what are these things I do and feel? Where are they coming from? So, yes, thank you for being the keeper and passer honor of the stories and keeping.
Well, it's a role that you and I both are doing. You have
Yeah,
become Miss
yeah,
Dawn to
yeah,
those
yes,
who are
yes,
younger.
yes, yes,
You are a matriarch in your own
yes,
right.
yes, yes, yes. I am the Miss Dawn. I
Yes,
am Miss Dawn.
yes, yes, you are.
Michael, God, I'm speechless. I really loved talking with you and sure appreciate your letting me do this. And let's see where it goes from here. I'm going to put a link to the video of the War Shirt play on here so people can go and watch the play. Uh,
Oh,
thank
that's
you.
beautiful.
I'm going to stop the recording now.
Oh, okay. All right.